Welcome. It's Sean Tennyson here at Entrepreneurship to the Point in afternoon in conversation series. Series is really about speaking to entrepreneurs and hearing their stories. And specifically, as we're going through this COVID-19 crisis, what is their lived experiences? How has their business changed? What's the strategy within the business? But also, what's the story behind the business? Who is the entrepreneur? And today we're speaking to Richard and Tsepo. You might not necessarily recognize Tsepo from his picture that we had earlier on, because unlike most of us, he's not been able to get hold of his barber. So it's good to see that he's just growing it all out. But yeah, welcome. You can please follow us on our YouTube channel. This is also being streamed live on YouTube. So at Entrepreneurship to the Point. Also, please follow us via our newsletter. So if you go to our website at www.ettp.co.za, you will please sign up for the newsletter, and any further information and updates you will receive. We will be having some additional webinars for the rest of the week. Tomorrow, please do tune in for a strategy masterclass with Abdullah Farachia on how to really unpack your strategy during this disruptive time. So that will be tomorrow at 10:30. The information will be on the screen later. I'm going to hand over to my colleagues as well. So first up, we're going to have Richard, who will be interviewed by Hannes Stein from the Property Point team. As you would have seen on your screen early on, we had the webinars. Please also use the chat facility below to be able to interact and let us know where you're dialing in from, what's on your mind, and if you have any questions for the two businesses that we're interviewing today. On that note, Hannes, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, for this opportunity. It's great to just to meet with businesses and to just to hear their story. It's not every day that a business has got an opportunity just to to share what they're all about, but not just what they're all about, but it's just those amazing stories that's out there, that's so encouraging for people to hear, and especially the SMMEs and small businesses. And it's really my privilege, Richard, to have in my home this afternoon, and just to chat to you around your business journey. I just want to say again that Richard Ramplin is the founder and director of RRC Consulting Engineers. And yeah, Richard, you've got a story. You've got a story as any other business. And let's hear about your story, your background before you started with this giant and this, in some cases, the monster. Entrepreneurship. So where did it all? What's the background? Where did it all start?
Wow, Hannes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much, from Property Point, allowing us the opportunity to be here this afternoon. We cherish it, and I'm hoping that everybody listening in is going to get something from this. Yes, Hannes, what a question. For me, it started in the Eastern Cape. That's where I was born. Sean, I know what you're thinking. Everything good comes from the Eastern Cape. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So born in the Eastern Cape. I went to a little school there called Port Rex Technical High School. From there, I got quite lucky. I was able to join the Navy, believe it or not. And I spent about 8 years in the Navy. 2 of them on board a submarine. So a little bit of submarine experience as well, thrown in there for good measure. And I actually got all my education in the Navy. I was one of the few fortunate ones that was able to get a full education out of the time that I spent in the services. So after my journey that I had in the Navy, I then became a professional engineer. I joined a company called, I think back then it was called Triacon Consulting. Unfortunately, it was called KV3 Engineers. Yeah, that's correct, KV3 Engineers. So I joined KV3 Engineers as sort of a run-of-the-mill engineering candidate back in the day. I spent about 6 years there as an engineering graduate. I got my professional engineering registration from there. And then I decided to make the big leap from Cape Town to Johannesburg, you know, and that's when things really started getting interesting, because I had to make new friends. You know, I didn't know anybody in the area. I didn't know anybody in town, except for my sister, but she was doing a lot of traveling herself. So I started with where everybody else starts. You know, you start with the locals and the neighbors and that sort of thing. But one of the things that I very quickly learned about people in Johannesburg is that they've got which now seems to be the compulsory side hustle, you know. And for me, coming from Cape Town, this was a new thing. I wasn't used to this, you know, complementary income that you have every month. So it started opening my eyes to quite a few things, you know. And what was happening at the same time for me was that I started getting very edgy about how our company was doing business and how we were dealing with our customers, dealing with our employees. And there was a lot of things that I felt like we needed to change. You know, I was one of those employees that started writing the memos about, I think we should change this. I think we should maybe try something a little bit that way. And you know, the engineering profession has been it's been coming for a very, very long time. And there's not a lot of change there. There's a lot of tradition in the engineering profession. And you know, if you're going to be a maverick on the block, people sort of start looking at you skew-eyed. And that's what happened to me, up to a point where I felt like I needed to make a change. So the change came. I decided to make the leap to entrepreneurship. This was probably about 4 years ago. At the time, I joined a partner because I wasn't very sure of myself, very sure of the business. And I had very shallow. We opened up a company called Shabba and Ramplant Green Building Consultants. And the idea behind that was that we had the green building consulting and engineering consulting, and we could provide this cohesive sort of coherent solution to the market. You know, unfortunately, looking back, I think we were probably a little bit ahead of our time. I think now might probably be more the more pertinent time to introduce that sort of product that we were looking at into the market. But what inherently happened was that because we had different disciplines that we were offering in the business sort of ended up splitting in a natural way, where the green building consulting went one way and the engineering consulting went another way. Yeah. So about 2 years ago, I ended up going on my own.
Richard, just before going on, I just want to zoom into that transition from, you know, from being a professional engineer consulting, and you're talking about this leap and transition and into entrepreneurship. Just picture that you know, that transition for me, because you know, being a qualified engineer, as you're saying, you know, it's very analytical, and now you're venturing into, you know, a new landscape of entrepreneurship. You know, it's all about taking risk. It's being out there, being a visionary. Just explain to me that, you know, that landscape, or that transition rather.
Big jump, Hannes, very, very big jump. And I think anybody that is an entrepreneur, is planning to become an entrepreneur, needs to understand this, is that one of the biggest differences between being an employer and being an employee is the complexity that comes with it. There's a lot of gray area that you need to deal with as an entrepreneur that I didn't necessarily have to deal with as an engineering employee. So there's a lot of I had to make it's a huge paradigm shift that you need to make in order to move from the one to the other. And I think, you know, if I can just maybe add this here, I didn't have the necessary skills at the time, looking back, to be able to handle that complexity, because my thinking was completely, it was completely different to where I am now, because the level of complexity that you end up having to deal with, the amount of gray area, and you know, there's a lot of situations that you end up in that you have to illuminate yourself by asking the right questions. And at the time, I didn't know that. So when I jumped into entrepreneurship, it was blind-eyed, to be quite honest with you. And I didn't really understand what entrepreneurship was until I got into it. And if you told me at the time, I probably wasn't going to do it. But you know, hindsight is it's a great thing. But there's that concept to it that I think we need to, anybody who's planning on becoming an entrepreneur, especially if you come from an established career like myself, is that you've got to understand that there's going to be a lot of situations where you don't have that structure around you, or even the support that you used to have when you used to be part of a bigger organization. And it's that complexity in the thinking that you need to, that you really need to start mastering as soon as possible.
Okay, Richard, just give me an idea of where you are in business, your employee tally. So you've been in business now for a couple of years. Just give me a bit of a sense of where your business is at.
Okay, so we've got two aspects to the business currently. So what we did about, I think it was about a year back, is that we started engaging with a lot of specific industry types of problems that I think a lot of entrepreneurs deal with, and one of the biggest ones was cash flow, as I'm sure most businesses have. So being an outcome-based business, we wanted to deal with this issue of cash flow. So what we did was we tried to see what's the best way of dealing with our cash flow, and after a lot of consulting in the business itself and looking in the environment, we decided to add on another aspect to our business, right? And that aspect of the business was specifically to deal with the cash flow problems that we were having in the core business, which is a consulting business. And it's opened up so many doors for us after we've done that. But coming back to your original question, on the consulting side of the business, we're probably sitting with about 10 employees at the moment. We've been quite fortunate over the last year and a half to be able to grow exponentially. And on the side business, which is assisting with our cash flow, we're probably sitting with about 19 employees in that business. But how we like to look at it, Hannes, it's we like to look at it at the number of people that the business supports. And the idea is to try and see if we can get to a point where we can try and support up to 5,000 people by the end of this year. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to employ 5,000 people, but if our business can support up to 5,000 South Africans, then we would be at a place where we're happy for the results that we've achieved for the year. Yeah.
Okay, Richard. Now so just give me some the last couple of years, surely there must be some key lessons learned specifically for you. You've mentioned the whole issue around cash flow, the importance of cash flow, but just some key lessons learned before COVID-19.
Yeah, so many. So if I have to put them, let's say it in order of what I think is the most important ones. I would probably start with, you need to, there's a lot of advice that's currently in the market for entrepreneurs, right? And what you need to learn very quickly as an entrepreneur is you need to be able to filter. You need to be able to filter what is important to you and what is not important to you. I'm going to give you a really good example of this, because one of my friends is a really good guy. He opened up a business last year. And the reason he decided to go into that business is because it was a very specific interest of his, right? And one of the things that you hear a lot of in entrepreneurship and when you start the business is that try and focus on something that you're passionate about and try and focus on something that you're really interested in. And the reason for that is obvious. I mean, if you're passionate about it, you're going to be willing to spend time and energy and effort into it. But I think what people need to understand very clearly about entrepreneurship is that it doesn't always end up the way you see it happening in your mind. As a matter of fact, it rarely does. I mean, if we just take the big companies, for instance, Shell, the major oil giant. Shell started out as a boutique shell selling shop. That's where Shell came from. That's why you see the logo of Shell is an actual shell. Because they started it as a boutique selling shop. Nokia started out as a rubber boot company. So you never know where you're going to end up. But the thinking is that you've got to be able to filter out those things that doesn't add any value to you as an entrepreneur. Because unless you can do that, you're never going to be really focused on what you need to do. So that's the one major lesson for me that I've learned as an entrepreneur over the last couple of years.
Okay, so before all this happened, the current landscape, what was your plans for this year? Your strategy going forward in this year before we landed up with COVID-19 lockdown, etc. Just the plan strategy.
Okay. Well, we've spent the last 2 years laying a foundation for our business, and we were hoping that this was going to be a real growth year for us. We had a couple of big projects that we were able to get on board. We had a couple of additional personnel that we brought on board to be able to open up different avenues of the business as well. And it was going really well until the lockdown started. So the idea before the year started was to, obviously we tried to grow our turnover, but more importantly, try to grow our profit margin. That's the one thing. We wanted to double our turnover by the end of this year. That was the one. The second one was to try and support up to 5,000 South Africans as a business. And then the third most important thing for us was to try and there's a level of let's call it employee engagement that we were trying to get this year that we haven't received over the last 2 years as a management team. So specifically what we wanted to do was we modeled our business very roughly on let's call it cybernetics, business cybernetics. And the idea was to see if we can get our business to become a learning organization as quickly as possible, right? Because the sooner you learn as a business, the quicker you can adapt, right? And we haven't been able to do that very well over the last 2 years. We've been successful to a large degree, but we felt that this was really one of the aspects that we wanted to bed down. So those were the three big drivers that we wanted to achieve for this year. Now, unfortunately, with the coronavirus, we've been thrown off the trails a little bit. But I think the important thing is that once this coronavirus, once the lockdown is over, we need to get back to where we were, and we need to try and improve as quickly as possible to try and get back to those three major objectives that we wanted to achieve for the year.
Okay, so the thing is now, how are you going to get back? Because you've got this plan and you've got this vision, and you know, for the end of the year with you know, doubling your turnover and the 5,000 people that you want to, and so on and so on. So COVID happened. So now you want to get on track. What is your plan to get on track? So what are you currently doing? You know, so let's just maybe one step back. Are you an essential service? Are you registered as a
no, unfortunately, we'd like to think we are, but no, we're not. The government doesn't classify our consulting engineering service as essential service now.
Okay, right. So what are you currently doing in the business with respects to vision, planning, new way forward? The landscape is changing. What is RRC's plan?
Okay, so the plan for us is when COVID started, the first phone call I made was to our accountant because we needed to make sure that we've got the cash flow. We needed to make sure that we've got the money in the bank. We needed to make sure that we've got all the regulatory requirements that was going to need us to apply for any sort of grant or any sort of relief that comes forward, right? So that we've got under lock. I'm pretty happy with where we sit with that. The second call that I made was to our IT guy because we needed to get all our personnel set up at home. It was a little bit of capital expense in those 2 days before the lockdown to try and get everybody set up. But fortunately, by the time the lockdown started, every single employee in the company was able to perform their function from home with the IT support that we required. Now, because we're an engineering consulting firm, a lot of our work gets done in an office environment. So, you know, platforms like Zoom and Teams and Skype and that sort of thing, that assists us quite a bit with trying to get the work done. So in terms of the effect that the coronavirus has had on us, it hasn't been as dramatic as it would have been if we were, say, a construction firm, for instance, where you actually need to be on site to get the work done. So a lot of our work, I'd say about 40 to 50% of the work that we were busy with, we were still able to continue with. So what we've done is that we've tried to transfer a lot of the projects that were sitting in different stages to a stage where we can go to a stage where we can actually start working on it, given the situation that we're in now. So some of the projects needed to be fast-tracked. And those are conversations that we started having with our clients very early on to try and see if we can start fast-tracking a lot of those projects. Quite incidentally, something that we did that I think ended up being very good for us was that the very first day of lockdown, I think we ended up sending out probably the same amount of invoices that we normally do over a 2-month period. And the reason we did that was twofold, right? The first one was that we wanted to get those invoices out into the market so we can start talking to our clients about getting paid for them, right? The second thing was, as soon as those invoices are out, if the invoice lands in your inbox, you will get a call from one of our company employees. And it'll typically be the employee that works on that particular project, because people don't pay, they don't pay invoices, they pay people. So we started having this conversation very early on. And the key for us was trying to see not just how quickly we can get paid, but how much we can get paid, all right? Because a lot of clients can't pay you 100% of your invoice that you're pushing out into the market, or even 10 of, or even 50 or 60% of it, but they might be able to pay 10 to 20% of it. So those are the conversations that we started having very early on to be able to get the cash flow going as quickly as possible again. And we've been very successful in that, and I'm quite happy in that regard. So much so that it doesn't even look like we've skipped the beat for the month. It might catch up with us a little bit later on, but for now we still, you know, it puts us in a strong position. So going forward, we need to. So one of the items that we looked at when we started having this conversation was, how do we innovate as a company? And when we're talking innovation, it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to change like a Nokia or you know, a Shell and change the type of business that we do. It just means that we might need to change the way we do our business. So the way we invoice our clients, you know, the way we do our deliverables, how we set up our projects, how we engage with some of our other suppliers. So we need to find a better and easier way of doing that. And we've been quite successful in especially pushing the idea of doing work away from the core hub of the office. So much so that I think we're actually at a point where we're about to make a decision to actually close the office down for the next 5 months. And we can successfully do that because we've been able to pick up on how to do all this work remotely. So innovation, it doesn't always have to be a big innovation. It doesn't always have to be a mind-blowing innovation. It can be a small thing, like delivering smaller invoices more regularly. You know, so that's the first thing. And then the other thing the other thing that I think is going to help us quite a bit in getting back on track is shifting our focus to focus, you know, to be able to focus. Because there's a lot of noise in the market about, you know, COVID-19, how it's affecting businesses, what sort of grants are out there. You know, there's so many things that's being thrown at the entrepreneur at the moment, that as the entrepreneur himself, as the business owner, there's a lot of complexity that you have to deal with on a daily basis. And what you don't want to do is that you don't want to add that noise onto it, right? So focusing on focusing is one of the big things that we're trying to do right now. We're trying to focus on the right areas and make sure that we actually focus. Yeah. So that's the two.
It's all about
two key things for us.
Yeah. Listen. And I do see, you know, that there's so many voices out there. You know, if you just go onto social media, you know, this one is saying this and this and this, and there's so much uncertainty as well. But focus is very important. You know, focus for entrepreneur during this time is important. Now, whilst you were speaking, you know, I'm just picking up. You're talking about we. So obviously that's your team. How have your, you know, how effective is and you're saying, you know, it's you know, you can even close down for five months or so, but how important is teamwork and team connection and communication during and for them to latch on to strategy and newness? How important is that in your business?
Honest, my team is my business, to be quite honest with you. That's why we can pack everything up and leave the office and then still have a business. I can't even begin to tell you how critical my team is. They, like I said, they are my business. So when I started this business, you know, the very first employee that I hired he immediately became part of the strategic thinking part of the business. The second employee that I hired was then the second part of the strategic part of the business. Every single employee in my company owns a part of the company strategy. And it's because they were part of the process that we went through when we set up the company strategy. And everybody that joins into the business, the first thing that we do is that we find a way to get you involved in the strategic part of the business. The reason we do this is twofold. So one of the key constraints that a consulting engineering business has is this the knowledge base in the business, right? So one of the things that we tried to do was that in order to create the elastic capacity in the business, in other words, in order to create a capacity where you can move people from one part of the focus on one thing to focus onto something else, is to try and make the skill requirements from moving from the one part to the other part as low as possible, right? So there's two ways of doing this. You can either upskill all your employees, right, for them to know everything, or what you can do is you can try to automate as much of that skill to a lower level where anybody can be taught on how to deal with it. And that's what we've done. So much so that you know, it's very easy for us to interchange, not just between projects, but also between what type of work people do in the actual business itself. And that all comes down to teamwork, right? Because you have to, if you don't understand your team, then you're not going to understand your business. So the critical thing from a management perspective, my biggest job in the company, you know, even though I'm the professional engineer, there's a couple of other professional engineers and that sort of thing. But my biggest job in a company is to be able to look at what sort of complexity do I filter through to the rest of my team. So I need to be able to handle as much complexity as I can on my side, so that what I give down to them is less complex, right? And the next guy needs to do exactly the same thing. And if your whole team understands that, it's easy to be able to deliver those objectives. So teamwork for us, Hannes, I can't even say it's the cornerstone of our business, because it is our business. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah. Richard, crucial, because you are not able to do it by yourself. It is a team effort, you know, going through this, you know, through this troubled time. So well done on that, you know, understanding the importance of team. Just, Richard, in closing, Richard's view on post-COVID and the landscape that we are moving into. What do you see? What do you expect? And what's your view?
You know, Hannes, there's a pessimistic way and there's an optimistic way of looking at it. I'm obviously going to choose the optimistic way, because I think that's the nature of the entrepreneur. I think it's a golden opportunity for SMMEs. I think it's a golden opportunity for smaller to medium-sized companies to get into the market and to make a real difference. Let me tell you why I think that. You know, when I initially became an entrepreneur, and I think it was Alan Ray's, it's one of his talk shows that I listened to. I can't remember exactly who it was, but he likened an entrepreneur to a little sailing boat, and those bigger companies to a big tanker. Now, a little sailing boat is obviously a lot more agile, right? So it's easier for you to duck and dive and go through the waters and that sort of thing. But it's also easier for you to get knocked down by a big wind. So that's why you've got to be prepared. Right, which I think if you're savvy entrepreneur, over the last 3 weeks, that's what you've been doing. You've been preparing yourself when the coronavirus ends, and what potential innovation is out there for you. Again, when I say innovation, I don't necessarily mean that you need to go and change the way, completely change your business, but there's innovations that you can do in your business. So there's a lot of opportunity that I see there. And from our perspective, what we've been doing over the last 3 weeks is because every Friday we have a company chat, you know, we talk about where's the company going to go to, where do we go from here? So what we got from that is that we've got the ability to adapt quickly, all right? And we've got the ability to be very nimble and agile about how do we do our business. The key thing for us, and this is one of the objectives for the company, is that we need to learn, as a company, we need to learn faster. Because if you don't know what you don't know, and it sounds like a silly thing to say, but if you don't know what you don't know, then you can't adapt to it. And by the time you adapt to it, it might be too late. So even though you can adapt faster than everybody else, you also need to know when to adapt and how to adapt. So learning as a company how to do that. That's what we've been poor at over the last 2 years, and that's what we're trying to do a little bit better, because we've got this advantage. Now we just got to be able to maximize it.
Richard, I thank you so much. I want to say to you, well done. You've got a plan, and I'm sure the doubling your turnover and the 5,000 people that you want to assist and support, you know, it's still on the horizon. So all of the best in your ventures. We commend you as a business that is positive. At least you've got a positive way of doing things, going about doing business, and all of the best for you and your family. And as a property point beneficiary, we just say to you all of the best, and thanks for chatting to you. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Hannes. Much appreciated. And Sean, we offer barber services, eh?
We'll let Tsepo know as well. So Richard, thanks so much for sharing your story and your journey. I think one of the key critical things for me was really my team is my business. Being able to acknowledge the fact that without the team around you, the business will not go forward. Thank you for sharing those insights. Thank you all of the attendees also for joining us on this afternoon's In Conversation series. We were going to have Tsepo on the line as well, but unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, he's not able to sign in at the moment. So apologies for that. We'll reschedule Tsepo's call. Maybe it's my comment around his little COVID afro that he's been growing. I don't know. Maybe he's going to go get some barber services before coming on again. But Tsepo, we definitely will reschedule. Thanks so much for joining us. Please do, excuse me. Please do catch us tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, we've got a masterclass series on strategy in an era of mass disruption, COVID-19 and beyond. Critical time for businesses to tap into what are those strategic practices that you need to implement now in order to sustain your business post this crisis. So please do tune in for that session at 10:30. Abdullah Farachia is a global strategist with foresight around the space of strategy. And then tomorrow afternoon, we joined by Arthur Anderson in our In Conversation series, sharing his story. Arthur is the founder and director of Conforto. So thank you for joining us today. Please do, once again, engage with us on the chat facility below. Tune in on YouTube to view the videos afterwards, and follow us on our newsletter at ettp.co.za. And in seeing that Tsepo's not able to join us, we want to just say to Tsepo, we do see you, even though you're not here, we do see you, and we'll be playing out with some John Cena for Tsepo. Cheers, guys. I'm out of here.
I don't know why you treat me like a criminal. We were just together though, on the same line. Why you pressing into though? Someone I act rough like John Cena, someone I get buff like John Cena. You used to be cool when I used to come to you, now you wanna act tough like John Cena. Some gala want beef like hyena, some gala get beat up Serena, some gala get wild, I gala get loud, I gala take shots like tequila. Unajifanya mwalimu wangu labda we ni Nyerere, nanfundisha kutulia labda huna kelele, takareka na Belinda hata mimi mwenyewe, ungependa situlie wakati we unaenda mbele, lakini mimi nimekupenda though. I don't know why you treat me like a criminal. We were just together though, on the same line. Why you pressing into though? Someone I act rough like John Cena, someone I get buff like John Cena. Used to be cool when I used to come to you, now you wanna act tough like John Cena. Some gala want beef like hyena, some gala get beat up Serena, some gala get wild, I gala get loud, I gala take shots like tequila.